BCS National Championship, which took place last month, had a rematch of the #1 ranked LSU Tigers versus the #2 Alabama Crimson Tide. Many people were sort of upset with this rematch because Alabama and LSU had played previously in the season in a very uneventful 9-6 win by the LSU Tigers. Alabama rolled to a victory, defeating the LSU Tigers 21-0.
Oh, that's good.
However, after this game and after this decision to allow Alabama to play LSU once again, many people realized that the BCS should probably be changed. The BCS does allow for the great traditional bowl games like the Rose Bowl, Orange Bowl, and Cotton Bowl to continue to be played. However, it does also put too much emphasis on computer calculations and coaches' polls, many of whom are still playing or coaching teams in the BCS at the time. The same is true for the United States presidential voting system. When the question is asked, should the Electoral College be replaced by a national popular vote, the answer is unequivocally yes. The national popular vote is a much broader representation and much more accurate representation of the United States' views as a whole. We need to change the Electoral College to the national popular vote, first because of Bush v. Gore, second because states can become overlooked, and third because of the way the candidates are able to campaign when they're forced to go to a national popular vote. First, we look at Bush v. Gore. When Al Gore was against George W. Bush in the 2000 elections, Al Gore and George Bush had won the election based on the Electoral College. However, Al Gore had the national popular vote, and many people felt that he should be president. However, because of poor recounts in the state of Florida, it was taken to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided in favor of George W. Bush, and he became our 43rd president. We need to look at this in a more broad spectrum from the people as a whole. The United States presidents was decided instead of by the people who voted in favor of Al Gore, by the United States Supreme Court, who is the one branch that is decided by the president and indirectly by the people. Many people were okay with George W. Bush becoming president in the end. However, it was not really fair. The Electoral College has 530 plus representatives to be given out. A candidate must win 270 to gain the presidency. In order for this to happen, many states become overlooked, just as many sort of bowl games become overlooked, and many sort of schools become overlooked. We need to look at the states as a whole. Many states, just like schools like Stanford and Oklahoma State, who felt that they should be in the BCS National Championship, became overlooked. Even though they are a big program, or they're bigger schools, they were not able to play in the national championship game. One of the big states that we think of in the presidential election are California and Texas, two states that are polar opposites in their voting patterns. Texas will always vote Republican, and California will almost always vote Democrat, which is a big boost in representatives for both candidates. However, how many times are you going to see Barack Obama campaigning in Texas in the upcoming elections? Never. These states become overlooked by many candidates. The same is true for smaller states, as we've seen with Iowa, New Hampshire, Montana, and even Wyoming. Montana and Wyoming are good representations of smaller schools, or smaller states, like TCU or Boise State. Programs that aren't as big, aren't as well recognized, however, are still very strong programs. Just as Wyoming and Montana are so poorly populated and so scarcely populated, candidates aren't really able to campaign in such states like Billings, Montana, or Jackson Hole, Wyoming. These are the only great places to sort of campaign in these states. We also need to look at Iowa and New Hampshire, two states that almost decide the presidential nominees. Iowa and New Hampshire both have in their state legislatures rules that state that they will be the first caucus and the first primary. However, many candidates, although they might be viable candidates, can lose their chance at an election just because they don't have a good representation in these states. Candidates are forced to tailor their views towards a state instead of looking at a broader spectrum. They're forced to go to all states, and try and gain as much support as possible to get the national popular vote. We'll see a much more broader view. This goes true for the campaigning, as I've said. The campaigning is the important part. As we've seen with Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum. Rick Santorum went to every county, all 99 counties, in the state of Iowa. This allowed him to gain much more popular support and win the Iowa caucus in the recount. However, the same is true for Mitt Romney, who's been tailoring his views to each state, flip-flopping on many key issues. If candidates are forced to keep a national view and keep a sort of broad spectrum, they aren't going to be able to get all the support that they need in each state. They have to keep focus on all things popular. Many of the problems that we have in campaigning is that we overlook certain key issues and we give candidates this sort of free range to do whatever they want. Just as the same in the BCS. When many coaches, such as Nick Saban and even Boise State's coach, are allowed to vote in who's going to be in the national championship, they're going to favor who they want. We need to force candidates to look on the broad spectrum and look towards the national popular vote.